She cocked her head, then said, almost sweetly, "Are you ready to communicate with your father, Charles? Rap 2 for yes, 1 for no." Madame Z clutched the edge of the table and threw her head back. After a long silence, 2 loud raps rang out. Ralph and Sharon gasped. "He is here now," Madame Z half-whispered, eyes closed. "He is speaking to us from Devashan." "Charles!" Ralph said. Stanley looked over at the sunless father, anguish and hope contorting his face. "You may ask your son a yes or no question," Mrs. Seaver said. Ralph nodded and licked his lips. His first words were barely audible. "Charles, are you safe?" Tap, tap. "You're all right?" 2 more raps followed. To Stanley's ears, they sounded close. He scanned the table. The others had their hands resting on the tabletop as ordered. He glanced at the panels behind Madame Z. Nothing. "Are you scared?" Ralph croaked. 1 tap. No. "Thank God," Ralph said with noticeable relief. "They said you died in an accident. Friendly fire. Was it an accident like they said?" Madame Z's eyes popped open, and she gave Mrs. Seaver a look that Stanley would describe as panicked. No raps followed, only silence. "Charles, was it an accident?" Ralph repeated, louder this time. Finally, Madame Z tossed her head back and started in on the moaning and mumbling again. She twisted her mouth in one direction and her neck in the other, then rolled her head while baring her teeth. Like the blown-off heads he had seen in Okinawa, Stanley thought, grimacing into eternity. Ralph looked like he wanted to cry. "Never mind, Charles. You don't have to answer that. I'll ask you something else." Madame Z's moans stopped, and the room filled with more creepy silence. With a jerk, she turned to face Stanley but stared past him, wild-eyed. Finally, she whispered, "Charles, are you still with us? Are you still speaking to us from Devashan?" Stanley sensed movement below him and felt Madame Z's fingers clutching his hand. Had she been holding it all this time? The air was still, but the flames of the nearby candles blew out, one by one. Then the table leg closest to him rose up and was levitating a half-foot or so above the floor. "Charles," Madame Z said forcefully. "Oh my God!" Sharon cried out. "Oh my God! What's happening?" Stanley glanced around the table again. Sharon's hands were pressed into her bosom like she was trying to keep her heart from having an attack. Kit still had Ralph's and Mrs. Seaver's hands in hers. She stared at Stanley with concern as the table continued to levitate, then whispered, "Stanley, are you all right?" Kit's words hit him like a slap, and he suddenly became aware of the sweat sliding down the sides of his face. He fought an urge to bolt. Madame Z opened her mouth to speak. "Charles!" Madame Z all but shouted to the air. "Remember, Charles, you are safe. You are safe. You are not scared." Then, without warning, the levitating table leg crashed to the floor with a deafening thud. No one spoke.